Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and on behalf of the NTU-SBF Center for African Studies, as well as the Singapore Business Federation and its Africa Business Group, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the African Angle Breakfast Series, Developing Business in Africa, Lessons from SMEs and Startups from the Olam Experience. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Johan Berger, Director of the NTU-SBF Center for African Studies, to say a few words. Mr. Berger, please.
Darlene, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, yes, on behalf also from my side of the Center for African Studies, welcome you to this fourth session of the African Angle Breakfast Series. The purpose of this is to then spread knowledge and listen to experts on topics relevant for Africa. I'm delighted to see so many of you be here today. Obviously we're sitting with an esteemed speaker whom I will shortly introduce in slightly more detail. If I may sort of in advance give future notice or notice of future events rather. In January we will be having Ali Zinc, which is a Southeast Asian and Singaporean company in the construction environment. And then also in March we will be having a slightly different angle. At this stage of the game we are looking at going from Singapore and Southeast Asia into Africa. In March we will do the reverse and see how does an African brand build a presence in Southeast Asia. The company that I have selected and been fortunate to get on board is Nando's. Those of you who know Nando's in South Africa know that they're very cheeky, in your face, politically incorrect advertising environment, and it will be interesting to see how they've taken that kind of approach and then employ it here. So that would be in January and March respectively. It really is my privilege to introduce a good friend of the Centre, Mr. Ranveer Chauhan, who is the MD and Chief Executive Officer of Edible Oils and Rubber in Olam International. Somebody whose views on Africa I really appreciate, who takes the big picture and also understands the dynamics of the operating environment as well. Olam, you know, as a company that from an African perspective we appreciate as well, because not only do they do well for themselves as a company, they are excellent for Africa, and anybody that's good for Africa is a hero in my eyes. So I think without further ado, Ranveer, thank you very much for your willingness to talk to us this morning. We look forward to your views on building SMEs and lessons for SMEs in Africa. Over to you.
Excellencies, friends, good morning. Let me first start by thanking the good work and the effort that SBF and the Center for African Studies puts in together for creating awareness about Africa. And it's an honor for me to be invited here to talk to you and share some views about Africa. I'll have to start by making some disclaimers. I don't work for an SME. And I will have to translate my experience from working at Olam International and working in agriculture communities in global trading environment to bring some relevance for SMEs in Singapore. So I'll put in some effort towards that. I haven't come alone. I've come with a lot of support. So I'll introduce them and take their help as we go along. One of them is my colleague, my co-author and a very good friend, MD Ramesh. Please raise your hand. He's based in Durban. He and I had met years ago in Nigeria when we first joined Olam. My other colleague, and now based in Kampala in Uganda, is Arnie. Yeah, if I call out his full name, it's not easy for me. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Mr. Sanyal, Arnie. For added credibility, just in case you thought that only men's point of view would be there for Africa, I requested my wife to join me today. Anuba, she has been my partner in Africa for over a decade and only adds to the credibility of what I say, what Ramesh and I have to talk about Africa, that truly it's not just about business, it can be about family, and it is very much livable and an enjoyable place. So that is my support, apart from the vast support provided by Johan from Center for African Studies and SBF, my good friends. I came back last night. I had started my journey returning from Nairobi. So if I'm somewhere lost between Nairobi and Dubai, do excuse me. I take Ramesh's help to point out that I'm now talking about Dubai and not Africa. A little bit of background. I work for Olam International, and this is where we are today. It is a majority owned company by Temasek, and there is a significant ownership by Mitsubishi. We see here Kevalam Chandrai Group. They are at 4.8%. When I joined Olam, it was 100% owned by them. This business started in Africa. It is present in 24 countries in Africa. It is about agriculture commodities. Over these 25 years, 26 years that we have been in business, we have grown from 1 country to 70 countries globally, 24 of them in Africa. We have remained in the agriculture commodity space. We have created a lot of value for our shareholders and many communities that work with us. I have been, of course, privileged to work in the company, but I use this example not only to make a pitch for Olam, but also to give you an idea about what something that started in Africa, that was very Africa-oriented, could have created so much value, and that is sitting now amongst us in Singapore to be making a pitch for a global business. So that is, I would consider, a very big case for the power of Africa and the opportunity over there. This is what we are in Africa today. Allow me to keep turning back at the slides so that I am also familiar with what I am presenting. We are present in 24 countries, and we are participating in 18 products. When I say 18 products, largely you have to understand we are in agriculture commodity space. Close to 32,000 employees. They draw their wages either directly from Olam or are on contractual basis with us. Now we will come down to talking about Africa, and I will progressively, after sharing some of the macro information, come to information which is directly related to what we can do, what we can use. I'm sure there are a lot more people, much more qualified than me, to be talking about the macro picture. I'm not an economist, so I will use this information to still create a base for us. So the big sectors that we can look at in Africa: agriculture, mining. So mining, drilling, oil and gas, all that is a very large sector. Manufacturing is not the biggest sector in Africa, and which is where I would say and make a pitch that that is where lies the opportunity. It is not just that because it is small, it will remain small. Like we have seen the economic journey of all regions, all countries. It grows. Manufacturing has to grow. Investment and banking, very dynamic sector. Communications and IT, surprisingly very dynamic. So while whatever we may think about the communication challenges in Africa, I do recall right from the time 93 when I went from India to Africa. India had not yet come up on the IT space. And Africa in Nigeria used to have a much better communication, at least for my business requirements. It had much better connectivity, even transportation. I had not seen the quality of roads I saw in Nigeria those days back home in India. Don't go into the details of this map. The whole of the continent is blessed with resources. Agriculture, mining, natural resources, the whole of the continent has something to offer. Okay, I have pressed something here. Okay. Just to get a sense of the size, Africa is about 30 million square kilometers. That's about 10 times the size of India. So people sometime at the back of the mind think that, yeah, it is just a small space out there. The population size is approximately the same as India. The economy is bigger than India. So that is what we are dealing with over here. So again, The pitch here is to say it's a vast geography, a very big opportunity land out there. We have trading blocks, exactly like we have ASEAN over here. We have 10 countries that have organized themselves to trade better, to coexist and partner better. Similarly, Africa has got its own trading blocks. So we have seen that on the left side, you will see over there, that is ECOWAS. Down here, we've got COMESA. So ECOWAS is Economic Community of West Africa. COMESA, Ramesh, you'll have to remind me what it is. Community of South African States? Southern African States. We have got East African Community. So there are various regional collaborations and partnerships which allow you to participate in the whole region instead of just looking at one country. I will mention a lot from my background of agriculture, but in the end I will not limit myself this debate to that field only. We have got cocoa, cashew, sesame seeds, groundnuts, coffee, oil palm fruit, cotton, sugar and rubber. These are what I mentioned. Olam is active in all of them. And Africa is a leading producer today of cocoa, cashew, the world's biggest region for the production of these crops, and number 2 for many of the others. It's a very busy slide over here, complex. Don't go through that. This material will be available for you later. The way it is structured is the crop, let us say I take cassava over here, which country, the kind of yield you have, and the best producer in the world. It just gives you a sense of, in case there is a certain level of yield in Africa, what is a global standard? And that gives us a sense of opportunity in improving the yields in Africa. We are gathered here today to look for business opportunities in Africa. When we go over there, as we go anywhere else, we do not participate in just the success story. We create that success as businessmen. So the opportunity here lies in improving the yields in Africa. This slide, again very busy, gives you the size of agriculture as a share of economy. You will just see, starting from the bottom, Cameroon at 24%, going up till 60% in Sierra Leone. That is not an indicator of strength of an economy. You will see global economic data that all strong economies have agriculture less than 10%, even less than 5% of their total economic size. It only shows that right now Africa is in the early stage of economic journey, and agriculture is still very important over there, but we will be having the new phase coming. It is not across the sector, so there are people, there are countries from 60% they have moved on to 24%. If you look at countries like Mauritius, if you look at South Africa, they are even below. That means they have moved on and ahead in this journey, in the economic journey. The main themes for policymakers, NGOs, and even let us say the DFIs, the development finance institutions, that we talk about in Africa are not very different from what you hear elsewhere. Employment, food security, import substitution, and upskilling. Out of these, employment and upskilling, I guess, are pretty common across a lot of geographies that we are aware of. At least I'm quite aware of from India. I'm quite aware of these from ASEAN. The idea of this one again is to keep in mind what are policymakers and what are bankers and what are developmental finance institutions looking at. Where will I find support in case I come up with my idea of a business? Again, talking about the opportunity in Africa, we all know that we have got a struggle for new lands for agriculture. Africa holds the biggest potential of that. So this gives a sense of how much is Africa's potential in agriculture on new lands. So Africa has 60% of the new lands available in the world for agriculture. part of this again deciphers for us how much of this land and what could it be used for. This again, if you see, is a chart that talks about the crop yield and economic potential versus where the current situation is. So Africa, we find sub-Saharan Africa is at the bottom of the table. It is good to mention sub-Saharan Africa because just to remind us, South Africa is a very advanced agriculture country. The yields over there and their ability to extract value from agriculture is very different. It is like any developed country. So in sub-Saharan Africa, we are below 30% of the potential. Compared to East Asia, we are talking about close to 90%. That is where the opportunity in the agriculture sector lies. Improving yields in agriculture in Africa. This is about total renewable water resources in the world. And you will see Africa has got a mixed kind of landscape. So part of it is deficit in water, and part of it has got extensive water resources, which is where not every place will be suitable for agriculture, but there are parts that can be really leveraged over the coming years and even decades. This map talks about the water availability in 1990 and how it will be going forward. Again, we will find many countries over here which are potentially going to hit water scarcity in the years to come, but at this stage they have enough water for agriculture requirements. We mention agriculture because agriculture is one of the bigger users of water in our economic scenario. Another sense of opportunity, if you look at the population of Africa, it's expected to double from here, 2 billion people by 2050. Change in working age population. The new generation coming into the workforce in Africa is at higher risk of not finding jobs than elsewhere. So that is a sense of this chart. Again, an opportunity for a new investor like any of us in this room who goes there, you are expecting to look for talent that is available, not only today but in years to come. These are more generic, but I have crafted them specifically for Africa. The demand factors, global growth population. So in case you're going to produce in Africa, whether agriculture stuff or you're going to manufacture things over there, the demand is defined by the global population growth, rising income, true for Africa as well as for many parts of the world, dietary shift that comes with urbanization and with growth in income. Biofuels, I put it as a question mark. Because even we as a company are working on this sector. Biofuels is not just for replacing the mineral fuels, but also it comes in as a support for agriculture. So agriculture, while will be dependent on food as a demand and industry as a demand for material like cotton and rubber, there is a synthetic demand created by biofuels. It has been proven that policymakers can use this lever very effectively, and some of the African countries are now looking at it. The supply factor, scarcity of arable land, which I explained earlier, that Africa holds a big potential on this part. Agriculture productivity improvement, again, if you remember from the earlier chart, Africa is far behind on, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is far behind on agriculture productivity. So just taking the learnings, let us say from Asia into Africa in agriculture for improving productivity and yields is an opportunity. Climate change and environmental degradation, this will hold true in Africa also, but it is a threat to production capabilities across the globe. Logistical inefficiencies and storage bottlenecks. This is specifically true for Africa. When many of the investors who have come into Africa and tried to move goods, even 100-kilometer distance, they were coming back with references of what it costs in the US, what it costs in Europe, what it costs in Asia today. And they were really flabbergasted on seeing the cost of logistics in Africa. big opportunity over there. That is not an area to be worried about. That is an area to be really feeling hopeful about, that yes, it will come down. It can cost us as much as $10 for moving things a bare 150 kilometers, $10 per ton. It is supposed to cost less than $3. Part of the factor is that Africa does not have the lowest cost and the most efficient infrastructure. It is dependent on roads and trucks. Many other parts of the world look at water and rail transport. So while they are massive investments and they are coming up in some of the places, but that is just to understand why is Africa so inefficient. Again, continuing with the Africa theme on agriculture, it puts together some of these thoughts that I have shared with you earlier. This is talking about the inefficiency of the current agriculture in Africa. So while it is holding 25% of the arable land that is being utilized, it only produces 10% of the global agriculture output. There are only few cash crops that go out. Africa is not efficiently producing its own requirement, its own cassava and corn and wheat. Anything that it consumes itself locally, it is inefficiently produced, and communities even today spend a lifetime just growing what is sufficient for them. They're not able to make anything out of it. Requiring money for investing in assets, for sending children to school, it requires a far higher level of productivity in Africa, in agriculture. Agriculture generates 17% of GDP in sub-Saharan Africa, while it must be employing close to 50% of the population. So foreign direct investment in Africa in agriculture is expected to grow 4 times. There are similar numbers available for infrastructure because Africa is lacking in infrastructure. What we identify as focus areas in agriculture in Africa: developing downstream agribusiness activities such as processing, upstream activities as supplying inputs, developing commercial agriculture, not just subsistence agriculture or individual holds, support and link smallholders and small enterprises to productive value chains. You don't have to be a farmer to do this. This is where slowly we start moving towards what are the opportunities for SMEs. Do you only need to be a farmer? Even dedicating yourself to the agriculture space in Africa, you don't need to be only a farmer. You can be adding value here, linking smallholders and small enterprises, creating value for them, eking away the inefficiencies that exist today. This is again talking about what is the current gap of the agriculture and the food requirement as well as production in the continent. If you look at wheat, edible oil, sugar, rice, maize, we find these to be the biggest opportunity. What is being imported and what is being exported. So the missing number over here is what is being produced locally. But the import number will indicate the size of opportunity. Does Africa need to import any of this? Not at all. It can produce its own. So some of the opportunity will come in these investments. Don't look in this slide for a direct investment opportunity. You will need to become a farmer to do this. It is just the size of the opportunity and the sense where it is. Now, where do the challenges come from? Access to financing. So let me stop a moment over here. Over the last 15 years, I have seen, for example, Ivory Coast grow its cashew crop from 100,000 tons to 600,000 tons today. It's the world's biggest producer of cashew. It used to be India and Brazil earlier. And this has happened in a period when we say that Ivory Coast was going through a period when policies could not be very, the policy making in the country could not be sustained because of the political situation in the country. So over that 15 years, Ivory Coast has done this. It's the world's biggest producer of cocoa. In the 80s, it used to be Ghana, but at some stage, Ivory Coast took over. It has got a strong culture of agriculture production apart from these two. It's Africa's biggest producer of rubber. It produces bananas, papaya, cotton, coffee, sugar. The history of this lies in the DNA that was set in the economy in the 70s and 80s by the first president. He chose a partnership model with France. Ivory Coast was a colony of France, and when it gained independence, it chose to partner with France and say that we will work with you to develop our sectors. And Ivory Coast is actually quite one of the sub-Saharan countries that has got reasonable development in manufacturing, services, and agriculture. It won't compete with South Africa, it's not that far advanced, but it will be ahead of a lot of this set of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So what happens is it sets in the DNA. Even today, I do not know exactly how does that cashew grow from 100,000 tons to 600,000 tons. Which kind of banking infrastructure is there? What kind of banking products are available for the farmers? How do they reach the farmers? Because I know the challenges of banking sector and its reach in rural side in Ivory Coast. But somewhere the DNA comes in place in the economy once you have set those policies. So that is where I have seen the opportunity. We keep on talking about Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, having a good tradition of agriculture. But what Ivory Coast has been able to do through some coherent thinking on policy side shows in the results today. Guinea as a country has sat on a huge potential for all these years, decades. It specifically chose that it will lead its country by itself. It does not need specifically any partnership with France. So we many times use that as an example of what happened when they chose to shut down their partnership on the policy front as a country. They were not experienced enough to have policies that could grow the economy. And they have seen the result today, 40 years later, 50 years later. So part of it comes when I say access to financing. It is not as easy as just sit over there, open a small shop of microfinance and start extending. Because it requires some kind of security for you to be able to extend that finance to the people. How do they think? What kind of security do you have for your money? Property rights, they're very haphazard. So practically anybody can be a farmer in Africa, especially the local African. Can he show you a piece of paper that he owns a property? Now that's a different thing. All of us know that if he can't show us a piece of paper for that property, we cannot extend him any kind of finance. Then I'm taking a big risk of farm income. So other than just growing what I need, how do I get cash out of what I grow? Infrastructure for market access. Very few countries have got either a dedication of their annual budget towards rural roads or even taxing the agriculture produce for contributing to the rural infrastructure. Very few countries have it even today. Migration to cities, the easiest thing. So sometimes I look at the not very educated kids in urban Africa, and I really wonder that why would they leave their village and come and work here in these very dire circumstances. You help a car park somewhere in the main city and you pick up some 100 CFR, 50 CFR, whatever the driver gives you from that. On that you're surviving. But when you go to rural Africa, you realize that that 100 CFR is not available. You don't see 100 CFR in a week many times. So you'll see a basket full of pineapples being sold, and if they get 500 CFR out of 500 CFR, incidentally, is about $1. So when I say 100 CFR, it is 20 US cents. So let's say 30 Singapore cents. We won't even know what to do with that money. When I sit in a taxi, many times says, okay, fine, just leave it. I don't have change. It is that kind of money. So for that money, the youth has moved to urban side. You imagine, we know what to do with one person. Over here in Singapore, to employ one person, I have to start thinking in terms of 1,000 Singapore dollar. I just use him as an assistant somewhere to help me pick up things and keep them somewhere. When we hear that people are working like that for $1 a day, then we think that, okay, maybe I can make use of this opportunity. An agenda for getting Africa moving, again related to agriculture, enhancing agriculture productivity through yield improvement, committing to infrastructure, facilitating access to technology and inputs. We talk about fintech. I'm only talking about agri-tech right now here. Inclusive investments, that it is not just me who's investing over there and taking the fruit of it, but the fruit of that investment, not just the collateral advantage, but the real financial advantage of that will be coming to the people and the communities where we are investing. Enhancing access to land and tenure security, so basically property rights, promoting effective and innovative financing, building skills and entrepreneurship. So these are what we identified in the agriculture sector. So okay, moving on to who has been there. So apart from so many African names, let me take the names of non-African businesses that have set themselves up. The Chanrais, the ones who set up Olam in 1989, they reached Africa in 1890. The Manji family, I met him in Tanzania when I first moved there. 1965, his father moved from Gujarat in India to Tanzania and by road made his way across to Congo. So these still sound like those romantic old days. We have missed out on all of them. We can reach out any part of Africa today, so maybe the opportunities will be more difficult. So we'll go down the list. Raojis, still 1922 in Congo. They also moved from India, Pakistan. Mr. Singh, I don't remember anymore. That's his name I remember. I met him at breakfast in Tanzania years ago. And he told me that his grandfather was a naughty boy in Punjab. And his father, the grandfather's father, couldn't afford to keep him there. He was creating a lot of trouble. So he packed him off to Tanzania. Started off by assisting somebody in a farm. By the time I met Mr. Singh, the grandson of the original naughty boy, he had become a very large farmer and an agriculture sector processor. Tarun Gupta, very interesting. His company sent him off to Africa to have a look, to suss out the market. He landed in Ghana, he stayed in a small hotel, he had a very small budget. By the time he came back in the evening, he saw that his bag had been opened and he had lost his passport. So he was stuck now in Ghana for 5 days. It took the Indian embassy 5 days to give him a passport. In those 5 days, he went around, he had nothing better to do, met some people, saw the opportunity, came back, gave his report to his company. He saw that the company was not going to work on that report, gave up his job, went back to Ghana. By now, he has a pharmaceutical setup in Ghana. He manufactures medicines in Ghana. So that was the beginning of his journey over there. Punjabis in Liberia, that's the name of a family. So the Punjabis, they're actually Sindhis, but the name of the family, the surname is Punjabis. They went there as employees of other Sindhis. They went there as employees of Chanrais. This was another way for entrepreneurs to grow, SMEs. They work at the shop, they're the shop assistant. After 2-3 years, they set up another shop somewhere else, some other town, or maybe even the same town. Vipul in Ghana. Vipul used to be my colleague. He joined us. He studied his MBA in India, joined us in 2006. 2008, he gave up. He came from a business family, and we wanted him to move on to some other country. He said, no, I'm comfortable here. If you don't mind, I will leave Olam and start a business. By now, he's into real estate, he's into agriculture commodity trading, doing very well in Ghana. Arun, again, Olam employee. This was, I think, before 2000. Brilliant guy. He and one more colleague decided that they are going to set up shop in Nigeria, and they started a timber and a scrap metal trading business. By now, Arun has set up, I think he's got a turnover of $100 million. He's based out of Dubai. He has got a big investment in metal smelting in Nigeria. Mr. Gautaman, I was hoping to see him in the room today. He used to work for Joban Putras in Rwanda and Burundi. From there, they moved him to Hong Kong because that is where their financing base was. Slowly, he felt that he would like to go on his own. His break came when he invested, he put up some 10% for an apartment in Hong Kong. And a year and a half, the property boomed and he got $150,000 out of that. That was the beginning of Mr. Gautaman. He gave up his job and started with Nigeria and Ivory Coast. He sourced products from China. He was sitting in Hong Kong. China was a closed market those days. So he sourced the products from China and supplied them to Nigeria and Ivory Coast. Why Nigeria and Ivory Coast? Because he had a friend in Nigeria and another friend in Ivory Coast. I'm giving you a list of these. They are different journeys at different times. You forget about SMEs. They were individuals who started. Somebody started with $100 in his pocket. Somebody started as an employee and just broke off. Somebody had $10,000. So we are trying to pick up from these examples. And they are as recent as these times that I mentioned. Vijay again, another colleague. I met him in Cameroon. He left and two of them wanted to set up a business. One of them moved on to Australia and Vijay moved to South Africa. They had a sourcing base from India. Somebody in India wanted a market. Vijay opened up the market in South Africa for that company in India and his partner opened it up in Australia. By now, Vijay has set up a packaged food business in South Africa. The second list in green are people from Singapore. GMT in South Africa. And I was always surprised. I asked Christina, why did you think of South Africa? She says, Mr. Tan, the founder, he always wanted to deal in high-end product, luxury products, but he could not get an agency in Singapore. The only place he could get an agency for was in South Africa. So he asked Christina to move to Joburg, and that was the beginning of their business in South Africa. Madame Loy in Nigeria, she sits in Onitsha. So Ramesh and I would remember Onitsha used to be one difficult place. It used to be a crossroad, and she sits there and she has set up an electronic goods distribution business. EcoWise, not Singaporean, from Johor. They manufacture agriculture units, processing units. They manufacture specifically for us palm oil crushing units. So we took them as contractors to Gabon when we set up our own plantation company. By now, he said that you seem to be requiring low-cost housing for your plantations. I can do that. Then he set up his office in Gabon. So while he has an office and a business in Johor, he has started in Gabon. He has already done business in Liberia. For Lam family, Shume is not there today. Her father set up the port infrastructure company, Rwanda, Gabon, Algeria, and they have now, while they have sold off the port business to Mitsui, Shume still runs a poultry business in Rwanda. Wilmar, when I meet Mr. Kunong, he tells me that he first went to Africa, he went to Mozambique in 1978. That has been the journey. From there, they bought in a partner who has been trading into East Africa. Wilmar today has $1 billion investments in Africa. They are spread over 15 countries. Tolarams, as much Singaporean as all of us, they came in from Indonesia and they have businesses in Nigeria. They also set up now business in Ghana. Vega Foods, I understand one of the breakfast series was by Vega Foods and they shared their experience of supplying packaged food to Africa. I share these names just to give a sense of a variety of people who have set up business in Africa. It is not just the big boys, you need a Temasek check or you need a SQ check, nothing like that. On your own. Perhaps this will be my last slide in which I talk about agriculture, I hope so. Urban food market. is seriously going to be an opportunity in Africa. Why urban food market? When we say urban food market, it can be as diverse as Africa consumes cassava, it consumes corn, and in the traditional sense of cooking, it takes time to cook all that. The urban food is bread and rice, if I talk about a staple. So rice is not traditionally African food. They have taken to it close to 8-9 million tons today, MDR, I would imagine. 9 million tons of rice consumption in Africa. As an urban food, it is quick and easy to cook. I mentioned Tolarams earlier. They partner with Indomie and they have introduced the concept of noodles and quick cook, the cup noodles that we have. They have introduced that idea to Africa. These are all urban foods, right from rice to processed food. Most African countries have got a comparative advantage in agriculture. When you go over there, you are not struggling. It is not like Saudi Arabia trying to grow wheat. They are natural environment for agriculture. I covered these points earlier. Let me mention what are the other opportunities that we will find. Trade, so supply to Africa, import into Africa. You may, like Mr. Gauthaman, sit in Hong Kong and supply to Africa, sit in Singapore, supply there, or set up a shop there and import. Shop, I use it as a generic word. I don't literally mean a shop. Set up a business, office over there and import. Train and educate, so you can be into education. Manufacture, so we are going to produce palm oil. You can create derivatives of palm oil for the African market, for the European market. Agency, like Mr. Tan of GMT, take up agency of companies, supply into Africa, service those markets for that principle. Service, transport, personnel transport, construction, hotels, hospitality, a seriously open sector in Africa. Restaurants, urban infrastructure. When the Vietnam crisis was going on, France tied up with Ivory Coast and Ivory Coast accepted to receive 8,000 Vietnamese just to give them home. By the time I reached Ivory Coast, this was 2,000. And there was a good culture of good Vietnamese restaurant. That was the origins of Vietnamese restaurants in Ivory Coast, because the Vietnamese community had come. I met a Vietnamese family in Ouagadougou in Burkina. They had their restaurant. Ouagadougou is at the edge of Sahara. During the dry period, you can practically go nothing over there. But during the other period, when there is a little bit of rain, just outside the restaurant, they will grow their salad. So families have put in that kind of effort. You don't have that much money. You grow your own greens for using in the restaurant and you serve the market with your produce. Unlike some of the countries, Africans are quite open to other cuisine. So you can set up a Vietnamese restaurant, you can set up a Mexican restaurant. You don't have to go to only remote places. The urban scenario in Africa, urban scene in Africa is very dynamic. Where could we go? I've just gone around the map. So the first column down, then the second column. I started from the west of Africa, from the 54 countries. I just picked 13. I realized that there's a duplication of Gabon over there. So there are 13 countries here. Why 13? I'm sure for this group, for Singapore, 13 is good enough. I could have even reduced, I could have made it 8. Gambia, small country, Anglophone. Côte d'Ivoire, big opportunity, Francophone. Ghana, I mention it because in our mind we carry these issues of Anglophone and Francophone, that it may be more difficult in Francophone. So that's why I call it out. Ghana, Anglophone, very welcoming. Togo, Francophone. Benin, Francophone. Nigeria, Anglophone, very, very large country. Gabon, Francophone. Congo Brazza, Francophone. Congo Kinshasa, the big Congo, Francophone. Angola, Portuguese, Zambia, Anglophone, Mozambique, Portuguese, Uganda, Anglophone. So when I call these out, those are the languages you need to be expecting when I land up. But all the places you can get away with English. So these would be my list of where you could go. These are some of the sectors, other than I kept on harping about Africa, about agriculture. So these are some of the sectors that come to my mind. All of them are open for SMEs. We don't need to be a large billion cap company to be going there. When could we go? Now. Thank you. Thank you. I'll still make a plug for Olam. Just to explain how at least we work. Now that is less relevant for SMEs, but important for us to talk about what are we looking at. I had mentioned to you earlier the areas that will be important for policymakers. Okay. So we now look at some of these UN goals. We talk about aiming towards no poverty. We want to work towards that. Zero hunger, climate action, and partnerships for goals. That means we will be inclusive in our business. It will not be just Olam that will benefit. So these are strong commitments that we make. When we go there, the policymakers are clear about these messages from Olam. We talk about growing responsibly. So we use that phrase a lot. That while we want to grow our business, when we were younger as a company, smaller, we used to be quite in the face and we used to say we want to grow, we want to be profitable. As we grow bigger, our footprint is bigger, we realize that we need to grow responsibly. We just can't grow. Growing responsibly covers our commitments in commerce, in environment, and social. So these are the messages that we go with. Thank you. So that is what I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to take any questions that might come.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, could I check if there might be any questions?
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. Just on this very list, I'm intrigued that Rwanda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania are not mentioned in that list. About 2 months ago, other speakers mentioned those countries. And I'm just curious as to whether the difference is because of industry focus, different segments, or how do you come up with a list like that and not mention those other names? Thank you.
Rwanda I didn't mention because I have not been there. It's a small country. You will face some challenges because it is really landlocked. Tanzania and Kenya I didn't mention because I have been there. And Kenya, I always say that seems to be for Kenyans. I don't see too many outsiders succeeding over there. So they have created a not yet open enough, big enough, like you talk about China or India. It is at that slightly early phase when the local people are capable enough, good enough, you'll go there and you will find that the opportunity is not as open as you thought from outside. It's very visitable, very approachable, very livable. But to do business, at least I won't choose. It is one of the countries where Olam is not present. Tanzania, also similar to Kenya, not as dynamic on the policy side, so I wouldn't choose that. Ethiopia specifically I didn't mention because of these last 2-3 months of development. So across Ethiopia they seem to be having some civil problems, and it will be distracting if I mention it over here. So while it's clearly a place to go, but wrong time for me to mention. So I just picked these, that these are really open, there's no policy issue, no current civil strife, nothing. That said, when I talk about civil strife, the big problem in Ivory Coast started in 1999. And early 2000, my boss said, why don't you go to Ivory Coast? So I've been always holding it against him that he told me how much he loved me. When he saw a problem coming, he sent me over there. So, but I lived through 5 years of that with my wife and my kids, and that was the peak of the Ivory Coast problem. And we left from there to Ghana. We really liked Ivory Coast in that period. We left because the school was shut down and we faced that situation also. So we were not threatened, but we felt that it may be better for the kids to go to Ghana. But we missed Ivory Coast. So while I didn't mention Ethiopia because of the civil strife, I have lived through civil strife there. Ramesh has lived through some of it in Nigeria. And it didn't harm our business. It didn't threaten us personally. So many times those are some of the questions. I'm not shy about talking about them, but in Africa, some of these come to our mind, but they shouldn't. For a SME, they shouldn't be issues of concern. So I'll make a very, very strong case for that. And just in case, that's the reason I requested my wife to come actually, that we lived in Africa. She and the kids were with me for 13 years. And issues of medicine, medical health. So I remember the time like it happens with kids, my daughter fell down and she broke a collarbone. My son, as boys, he just went and banged his head into something, into edge, and he required some stitches here. So handle these usual kind of situations, medical situation, social situation when I mention a civil strife. And we could go back to Africa any day. We would be very happy for our kids. My kids are now grown up. We'd be very happy for our kids to go there, live their early lives, live with the kids over there. So I didn't want you to feel that I won't be able to say that in front of my wife. Yes, please. I'll just take this one. Yeah, thank you.
I have two questions. Can you tell us about some of the key issues dealing with government in these places? And also, what would be some of the key issues managing the people in African countries?
Managing the government came to us much later. So I'll talk now like SME. Olam was a very small company when I joined. We didn't used to deal with the government. There were government policies, we operated within that. And we used to clearly say that only where the policies are open enough, where everybody can play with a level playing field, we will go there. We will not go otherwise. In case it's a closed sector, only the people who know the right people can do business, we will not go there. So we have grown for many years in Olam by going to countries. I remember the time I was sent from Nigeria to Tanzania to start up the operation. And somebody over there came and said, I can introduce you to the president. You need to give me $10,000. I don't need to meet the president. I've got no business with the president. I've got nothing to tell him. And what all the president wants to tell me, I'm hearing it through his policies. So people thought that, the moment some outsider comes, let me ask him for a little bit of money and take him to meet somebody. What do I do with that introduction? I don't need it. I need it today. But I also grown up now to realize that I don't need to pay anybody $10,000 to see any president. Olam is a big name. When I send a card and say that I want to meet the president, many times it's not the president, I need to meet the ministers, they will receive me. That is one. Handling the people, so whether as suppliers, distributors, employees, as you would handle anywhere else. So I came to a scenario where most of the companies, Olam also started off with a very Indian face. So the Indian companies would be running with a shop mentality. You run your shop, everything you know, the other boy is there only to pick up things and put them around. But had we gone with that mentality, we wouldn't have grown our business. We wanted to grow. We would have one manager because he has the skills and the knowledge about the business. But there will be 50 staff with him who are locally recruited, talented enough, but they have never worked in a company of this size. So we recruited local people. We dealt with local suppliers, we dealt with local buyers. Local suppliers means when I have to buy cocoa and cashew, I have to give them money, and I will now waiting after 2 weeks for the cashew and cocoa to come. And local buyer for me means I have given him rice and now I'm waiting after 10 days for the money to come back. So you deal as anywhere else. You deal with people, talk to them, you feel comfortable, you look around, you depend on the capability of yourself or your manager to make that assessment. As capable people, as dependable people as anywhere else. And why it was always drilled into our minds that, no, you can't trust. That's why you have to do everything yourself. Well, you do everything yourself. You run your small shop. That's what our experience was. And I can actually go as a SME and run my small shop. The thing about Africa is that it's a very open economy. You go to India today, so you may feel more comfortable going to India. It's not an open economy. There are sectors that are completely closed. As a foreigner, you can't invest. Africa is an open economy. Very welcoming. As a policy and as people. Yes, please.
I don't have a mic, I hope you can all hear me.
Okay.
My question concerned the use of the free trade zones within Africa. For example, you mentioned ECOWAS. Would you compare it to a place like ASEAN, and in your experience, have these economic zones been effective and useful?
Thank you. Very valid. It depends on who you are. If your mentality is about doing one business in one place, you want to set it up, you go with that thinking. But actually the policies of these blocks, the trading and the economic blocks, are great opportunity. So in case I go with that opportunity, I will use this regional block. It is possible to do that. I've seen very few people do it, but there is a great opportunity just doing that. They work very effectively. I know about a company, their center manager, he just buys the supplies from one country in ECOWAS to another. And that is their business. Anybody else could have done it, but they as a foreign investor have gone there and just done that. Is it open sector? Yes. Are many people doing it? No. So it depends on what your opportunity is. What do you look for in opportunity?
And there's also free movement of people.
Yes. Free movement of people, yes, in a very different way. So, Africa can be formal and informal both at the same time. I remember the time when I have to go from Benin to Nigeria. I will go by road, I have to cross the border. As a foreigner, I need my passport, I need my visa, everything. But there's very active local trade. Local trade means within 5 kilometers of here to 5 kilometers of there of that border. Do you think those people travel every day with a passport? No. Some of the countries have a tradition of having a unique identity card, some others don't. And they know how to manage that. So there is an informal trade, but you can't participate in that. And you don't want to. That trade is worth $10 a day. You don't go to Africa for that. So Africa has this flexibility of policy, which is very amazing, very valuable. It works very well for their own people and works effectively for foreigners. I should also mention one more case. So I have this friend from India, and now at the age of 50 he gets up and says, Ranveer, I think I need some adventure in life. I've done enough of working. I want to build a business in Africa. I said, sure, any day. So he starts by discussing the idea. Then he says, you just give me a landing ground and I'll be able to do that business. So I said, okay, fine, you go to Mozambique. I got a business over there. You can start something new. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You are the one who seeks adventure. But 2 years later, after some time, he stopped talking to me, and then I found that he went back and started doing his own job. So if somebody wants simply an adventure, that's different. Somebody wants to set up business, that's very different. All of us know, we have set up businesses. You want to set up a business, be very clear what you want to do. That is where this list then comes in handy. When you tell me that I want to actually supply pharmaceuticals, then I tell you, okay, go to Gambia, go to Ghana, yeah. Right. When you have a specific query, there is a specific opportunity over there. Haphazard manner, nothing works. It's not as if, somebody will come and make us rich. Yes.
Yeah, the one question is, generally today people still got the impression that Africa is not safe. So
Africa is?
It's not safe.
Yeah, sure.
So even we got the difficulty, even we want to get our staff there, and they will say, you get me there, I'll quit.
Mm-hmm.
So how we can know more about this area and whether
Sure. I think by now what I've realized that there are communities that are used to traveling. And I'm surprised now that we have come to this situation in Singapore. It's very difficult to move our people out. Right? So I have known through personal experience that India is a good place to recruit in case you want to send them to anywhere in the world. Japan is not a great place, Germany is not a great place. So you have to pick up communities that are, so Japanese and the Germans are quite used to working in their own setup. They don't like to go out. Right? So by now I think we are reaching a situation that Singaporean and the youngsters don't like to go out. It's very difficult to send them to Jakarta. You forget about Africa. So if I have to set up a business, I will then find where can I find the right manager. And it is very doable. It is very doable. In fact, that's the reason Ramesh and I wrote a book, and let me make a plug for my book also. So we wrote a book 2 years ago. It's called Amazing Africa, A Corporate Journey. That's the name of the book. And the theme of the book is for living and working in Africa. So there are 25 short stories. They're not how to live in Africa or how to do business in Africa. They're from our experience of living and working in Africa. Just to answer some of these questions. Over the years, I shouldn't even say that I'm tired of hearing about people worried about security or medicine, etc. in Africa. I'm not tired because I'm used to it by now. But it's a common theme and a big fallacy. I look at Anuba now, I would rather live in Africa than in Delhi today. Any day. I won't go to Delhi. I've not lived there in 20 years, that's one. It's a tough place to work. In Africa, by now I'm very comfortable. I know where to live, I know where to work. So, people when I moved to Singapore, they said, you must be happy. I said, I'm not yet sure. No, Singapore may be an easy place to live, but all of us here are business people, right? We are not looking for a job right now, at least in this session. It's difficult to do business here, to make money here. For you to tell your son that, okay, fine, you set up a shop, it will be easy. It's not easy. Far easier in Africa. I would rather send my son to Africa and say, yeah, I think you go there, I know somebody, why don't you open a shop and start business? So sometimes people here in the SBF community, I have been approached to say that, but there may be risk. But we are in business for risk. Financial risk. And there is no other risk. If there was a risk to life or limb, I wouldn't be standing here and making a pitch. I would strongly urge that don't just send your son, send your daughter-in-law also. Send as a family. Yeah. So I was encouraged when I first joined Olam. I was married at that time. I was just about married 6 months, and the company said, why don't we have it that your wife can follow 3 months later? I said, I'm not so keen. So we went as a family, we went as a couple. So safe on that point. You have to get that out of the way. It is safe. Here we all talk about, security concern in Johor. People tell me that, I say, I can take care of that. I know how to be safe. I don't want to be foolish anywhere in the world. In London, in New York, in Johor, I will not be foolish. In Africa, I lived all these years, it is easy to be safe. Good medical facilities available at hand. Very good business opportunities, very good. And by now I think we have at least a community of 20 people who have some kind of business in Africa, in our SBF community. Yeah. Yes.
I work in the area of big data, analytics and IT. Is there any African market that you would recommend for me which you think is sufficiently, which needs this, is ready for this now?
Ghana is a good landing point, and for your sector then you should not be talking a country, you should talk a region. Where can you service and find your opportunities as a region? Ghana, Kenya, South Africa will be my suggestion. I'm not mentioning Nigeria because if you sit in Nigeria, you will focus only on Nigeria, and that's a very large opportunity. But if you sit in Ghana, you can actually focus on the region, including Nigeria. And for your kind of business, you need a small place where a little bit of stability and ease of communication for your team. So these would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Ivory Coast is another. Ghana, Ivory Coast, but Ivory Coast more francophone. Actually, they're good. Even your sector, IT, apps, entertainment. So when I say entertainment, media, Nigeria is dynamic on the movie making and the media front today. So all that is also coming up. Funds, you've got small funds sitting. A fund can be as small as $30 million. So it will sound like a very big number, but for a fund, if I tell you you got a $30 million fund in Singapore, it must be your family money. Otherwise, you can't make money out of $30 million as a fund. So all these opportunities are also there.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Allow me to thank my friend and colleague Ranbir. Ranbir, it's been very insightful, your views very appropriate. Thank you so much for your willingness to take the time to prepare a wonderful talk and sharing your great insight with us as a group. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Allow me just to make, I have 3 points, then I've already overstayed my welcome. I've stolen 10 minutes of your time. But I think when we look at Olam itself, very entrepreneurial. 24 countries, starting in Nigeria, I think it was. But not only are they entrepreneurial, ladies and gentlemen, they have made entrepreneurs of Africa's smallholder farms or farmers, helping them to develop businesses, providing working capital, which you did not mention, which I think is great if you have a look at the risk that they do face, providing somebody else with the kind of money. The opportunities that Ranbir has highlighted, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of them available, and they're there. Africa's challenges, of which there are many, are all opportunities for anybody looking in from the outside, and they need not only be, as Ranbir mentioned, at the big company level, but also very much also at SME level. And Ranbir did mention the large number of companies, entrepreneurs from this part of the world that have gone into Africa and are making money. You also find that in Africa themselves, a lesson that I've picked up, which is very appropriate, is that you frequently need to develop and grow and educate your own market. One of my friends in South Africa, down in Cape Town, Lufefe Nomjana. Lufefe is also known as the Spinach King. I wrote a business case of his, and it's on our website if you can have a look and read it. Looked at these community and saw a lot of obese Africans that were malnourished, and he realized that they would eat bulk food in order to fill up and not necessarily get nourished. And so he said, listen, let's feed them spinach. So he made spinach bread and spinach muffins and so on. But then convincing somebody that you need now not to buy bread, but spinach bread, which is slightly more expensive. You need to educate them first. So this is something which you need to bear in mind when you do move into Africa, is that the education of your market and the segment that you're serving might at times be a prerequisite for success. Ranbir, thank you so much once again, and I look forward to visiting you again in future sometime. Thank you so much.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending your Wednesday morning here with us, and I hope you enjoyed the session. On the back of the program sheet is actually a feedback form, so I'll appreciate if you could fill that up. I think Mr. Chauhan and his colleagues will be staying back for a little while, so if you might have any questions, I think they'll be more than happy to take them. Thank you.